Matt, I really appreciate you being on the Coffee with Dr. A today, and just want to take an opportunity. I'm really interested in learning about your transition into deanship. This is something that we haven't had in in these episodes, and it's something that I often think about. When do you transition from being a professor to an administrator, and the pain points? So that's one part that I'm really excited about talking about. But I also want to know more about your overall background. So, for the people that don't know you, how would you introduce yourself to them?
No. Well, thank you for having me. Matt Rousu. So I'm Dean of the Sigmund Weis School of Business. I've been at Susquehanna University for almost 17 years. And I have a lot of varied interests as an academic and kind of personally. And all of those together, I think, kind of helped in terms of guiding me to where I ended up becoming into a dean position. In terms of kind of what would people want to know about me, in terms of my economics research, I've done a lot of work with experimental auctions, but then I've transitioned into doing some work with pedagogy, which is how I kind of got to know you, Abdullah, along with a lot of the other kind of the teach econ community, as I would refer to them. That part has been a lot of fun, but then I've also really loved working with students. And yeah, I guess that's a short introduction.
I appreciate that introduction. So one thing that caught my attention is you were explicit about saying you had varied interests that got you where you are today. So let's peel the layers on that. When you say varied interests, what are these varied interests?
So I think within the academy, right? Like there are some people who love doing research. Like research is their thing, and they view teaching as somewhat of a burden. And I, of course, completely disagree with that. Then there are some individuals who they love to teach, but research isn't their thing at all. At Susquehanna, actually, it's a teacher-scholar model. We expect our educators to also be scholars, thinking that is the best way for our students to learn. How to do independent research is from learning on that. But then on top of that, we're a small faculty here of slightly fewer than 150 total full-time faculty members. So service is expected. And that's a fun way actually to kind of serve in the job as well, is to think through what areas do I like, what can I enjoy, what can I get into, and how can I use my skills in order to help advance the university's mission beyond just my teaching and scholarship, the work with students.
That's a really important discussion, and for new academics entering the academia, how do you balance between those varied responsibilities? When you're in graduate school, they teach you how to do research really well. Some institutions teach you how to teach, but the services component, how do you actually balance all of those three things? What are your tips for new academics going into academia?
Yeah, that's a great question, and if you figure out how the balance works, you let me know. I don't know that I've ever figured that out, but when we bring somebody in new, usually would say in year one, especially if it's a newer PhD, keep working on your research a bit, but often you're going to have several new preps, and that's going to cause some issue with that's going to take time. So we try to stay away from service in year one. What I tell people who interview here, and I mean, that's part of who we are, and it's a bit of both a signaling and a screening mechanism. We're at a place where we want people who realize, wow, with this number of faculty members here, I can come in and I'm passionate about this topic, and I could join a committee to try to help advance that at my university. Right? We have all sorts of ways you could serve. Various committees I've been on. I mean, I've been on the teaching and learning. I've also was on the scholarship. I was on the board of trustees, and then we have an athletics academic cooperation committee. We have an arts an events committee. There's sustainability committees. The religious life committee. Like, what are you passionate about when you bring something to the table to and help advance the university? It shouldn't. I always view the service as one that is really not hard to kind of quote unquote check the boxes. You hate to say you're trying to check the boxes, because you should be able to find something you think is fun and you think you can add value on, and you really like to do, and go
Yeah.
from there.
That's a really good point. And one thing that I didn't know when I first started off is there is a bit of flexibility in what services you pick, and your chair and dean and administrators should guide you into the things that you want to do. So you said you've been at Susquehanna for 17 years. Is this the first place after graduate school?
I spent 2 years at RTI International, which is a nonprofit consulting firm in the Raleigh-Durham area. I went to Iowa State University for grad school.
Okay.
I didn't think I wanted a small school.
Yeah.
I thought I wanted to kind of go to an RO1, which would have likely been in, say, an ag econ department or an applied economics department, and went to RTI initially. It was a great place to start. It really wasn't a good fit for me at that time, although the skills I learned were amazing. And ended up coming to Susquehanna shortly after. Not sure how long we would be here, but we kind of settled in. We love the area. We built a kind of a, people who we consider essentially family, right? Who are here, and we never left. So it's been a fun place for us to work and live.
Yeah, I've thanks to you, I've had the opportunity to visit Susquehanna, and it is a beautiful campus, great people, and just a great community. So I could see how easy it is to fall in love and stay. So for the people that haven't been to Susquehanna, a little bit of background on what it is to be as a professor at Susquehanna University.
Okay. Yeah, we have it's a 3-3 teaching load at Susquehanna. It's a campus. I think we had 2,302 students was the number last year. Dropped a little bit this year, I think, to like 2,235. A small drop between students taking leaves of absence. A slightly lower class, not too lower, but with the pandemic, numbers were lower in a lot of places. But I'm in the business school. One thing that's interesting for those who are studying business at Susquehanna, we are an AACSB accredited business school. We're private undergraduate only. In a private undergraduate only environment. There are literally 10 of us in the world, which is AACSB business schools that are undergraduate only in a private institution. So when we're talking to students, this is in very, very much a selling point that we will indicate to students that you get the top business education, but you're getting it at this amazing liberal arts environment. And it's really woven in between. That's our mission statement is, right, we weave the business and liberal arts together.
Yeah. And, one thing that stood out to me from my visit to Susquehanna University is how involved students are. Might be a smaller amount of students that are enrolled there, but the commitment, I remember my talk, I think I had about 100 students attend that talk. So on I think it was a Wednesday evening, which is a big showing. So great students as well.
Oh, it's great. It's a great place. I love the students here. We have slightly over 30% Pell eligible students. Most come from Pennsylvania, but then come a lot from New Jersey, New York, Maryland, kind of all the surrounding states, and then across the country. I love the mission of what we have here. Pell eligible students, there's students in the lower income ranges, but Susquehanna, I think, is in the top 7% of colleges and universities nationwide in terms of like ROI, return, income relative to tuition. And so if you think about that from, an economist standpoint, right, like that's what we live for, right? There's really good value. And, to speak more colloquially, right, if you're bringing in students who are perhaps in the lower income categories and they're graduating into the higher income, like that's, if you talk about what is the American dream, to me, it's the ability of somebody to kind of start from a lower income and be able to get into the higher income categories. That's kind of one component of it.
Well said. Well, and great effort and initiative. And the other thing that I like about Susquehanna University is there is well, historically, and I want to know how you've pivoted given the COVID situation with respect to international experience, right? Your students are
Yeah.
expected to have some sort of international experience.
So every student has to study away from campus.
Okay.
The not over 90% of them would go abroad
Mm-hmm.
for that experience. So, and then it's bracketed by a preparatory experience and a reflection, which we think really adds to the value if you're taking a trip. Now, some of them, it has to be a minimum of 2 weeks. So some within the business school, it's about half and half. Half the
Okay.
students will do, say, the 2 week to 3 week experience, and half will do a full semester. Campus wide, it's a little bit lower than that. The with that, one thing that we've made a big priority within the business school is actually to provide internships abroad for our
Yeah.
students. So this was a guarantee in what might be the worst timing in the history of decisions. It was early February of 2020, we released the guarantee that students could intern in a foreign country, like with the terms and conditions. One of them that I had no idea we would ever need to use was, look, if world events prevent it, right, we're not,
Yeah.
um, and sadly, a month later, we're like, okay, there are world events. What are we going to do here?
Mm-hmm.
One way we pivoted is we have all these partners in different countries all over the world that we used to help set up our students with internships. Well, in late March, early April, we called them and said, is there any way to do a remote internship? So they're at home and they could
Mm-hmm.
intern while with the student, with a company we had Barcelona, Singapore, London, Hong Kong, and I believe Melbourne, Australia. I think those the first four I'm positive about. I think the fifth one as well.
Yeah.
So we ended up having 44 students. I mean, we're not a huge school, so it's
Yeah.
44 current seniors and juniors who took advantage of that. We had alumni, we had donors who paid for the matching fees, and
Yeah.
then we provided everybody with SU credits for doing this. I was pretty excited to do that, right? I mean, when the world's falling apart, and
Yeah.
if you didn't have an internship by mid-March, it was tough to get one last summer. And this is an
Well,
opportunity for a student to, when they came back, they said, yeah, I had an internship with a firm in London.
yeah.
That's not the normal thing somebody could say. So that was, we're pretty excited to be able to pull that off. And I actually don't think that'll go away. I'm really looking forward to getting back into foreign countries. I think starting this summer, we'll have some students who are going abroad again.
Okay.
But the ability to do these remote ones, I don't think that's going to go away.
Yeah.
It's a nice opportunity to complement skills.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, remote work is not going anywhere, I don't think. So our students need to be
No.
able to navigate that landscape as well. So, this conversation as you're talking, I'm like, Matt is sounding like a dean, right? And you've been a dean now for how long?
Uh, Almost 4 years, actually,
Yeah.
between interim and the main, I don't know, it's never permanent, but, like the official position. So I started in interim on May of 2017, and I got the gig on a more permanent basis May of 2018.
Okay. And so, I've looked at your CV. I know your research. I know how productive you are. One of the difficult aspects of being a professor and switching to administration is giving up some research time. So before we go into how you actually navigated that decision-making process, I think it's important for people to know your research arena. What do you like to research?
Yeah. So I think there's a few main areas. So I've done a lot of work with experimental auctions
Okay.
over the years. And I started by looking at, assessing consumer preferences for genetically modified foods. How does information affect those preferences? I did some work on fair trade foods, some work on just how auctions themselves work. That
Yeah.
was some of the publication stream. And then I found out there was actually a fair amount of grant writing in public health to look at,
Okay.
using auctions to assess preferences for cigarettes, for smokers' preferences for smokeless tobacco, and then e-cigarettes. So a fair amount of work has been done on that. So that's been a lot of the stream has been experimental auctions. Then probably, I think it was May of 2012, I went to the first C-Tree conference
Yeah.
And that was in Boston, and wanted to become a better teacher and also see about some of the economics education research. I saw Dirk Mateer and Lee Kopic speak at kind of a seminar for Norton, and it's weird. It almost sounds like hyperbole to say life changing, but in terms of, it was very, very eye opening at a minimum. Like, I thought I was a reasonably good teacher, and I left there with the phrasing like, okay, I've been doing checkers and they're playing chess as far as how teaching goes. I was so far behind. And I started doing a lot of changes, but then I also tried to do some publication in the pedagogy space. Some of it was assessing how experiments worked. Some of it was more on, hey, I created a website, BroadwayEconomics.com, and here's a paper on how you can use shows to teach. And recently actually launched economicsofstarwars.com, where you can use clips from Star Wars how to teach. And so I think that's the other probably mainstream of publications. I also have liked to write for newspapers and popular like Forbes or Barron's or any place that will accept. I've kind of enjoyed I don't know if you'd call it the public intellectual view. I mean, that's not really traditional. It's certainly not traditional peer review scholarship. Pre-tenure, that's likely not going to get you very far in a tenure case.
Yeah.
But I've enjoyed the idea of having a voice on public policy issues.
Yeah, one thing that you mentioned AACSB. Your AACSB accreditation just went through. We were up for review this year. Just got done with our meetings, and one thing that has come out from these discussions is the idea of public engagement. So, there's focusing on research, but there's also adding other layers of how you're contributing to the mission of your institution, and reaching out a greater audience is also important. So you mentioned Broadway economics. You have a book out, correct?
Yep. I think you could see it. Let's see if I can get my finger pointing. It's right there.
All right.
Didn't do much in terms of, normally I would not have a book diagonal on my bookshelf, but I've been in enough Zoom meetings. I'm like, hey, why don't I have this angle?
Yeah. So we'll link to that so others could purchase it, hopefully. So productive research background, great educator, doing a lot for the community. Whenever we talk about administration with faculty members, they always talk about how horrible of a decision it is. I'm not sure that's true, but that's what people talk about. So from your standpoint, what nudged you to go into administration? And is this the first administrative position, or were you chair before this?
I was department chair for a year. I had served on the board of trustees for 5 years. There's two faculty members who go on the board, and I was elected for that. I honestly think that was much better training than anything else, because you start to see the whole university in decisions for the entire university. It's interesting you mentioned on being a horrible decision. I never wanted to be dean. I didn't know what the next step was for me 5 years ago or so, but I wasn't, being dean wasn't something I thought of, and I probably hated a lot of the administrative work too, thinking it's the stuff that gets in the way. I had a little bit of a mindset shift. Before, I was like, okay, what's going to make me productive? The skills that often make you marketable are how well you can teach, if you're trying to get into a teaching position, and how well you publish, right? Those are the skills that probably monetize better than good administrative work, at least externally. If you're going to come into a role as an administrator, you've got to realize you have to have a mindset shift, like, this is my work, to be able to do this. But I have found, I stepped into it on an interim basis, figuring the worst case, okay, I won't like it, but I will build some skills, and I'll be really helping the university out as they decide to, by filling in here for a year, and let them go ahead and do a search to get the right person in. That was the worst case, and it turned out I ended up really liking it. So.
Okay, so what do you like about the position? What are the pros on the pro side of this decision making process?
The pros of being a dean, at least at where I am, I can't speak to everywhere,
Hmm.
is I have a lot of freedom to essentially try to be an entrepreneur within the university to, quite simply improve our students' lives. Like,
Hmm.
what new initiatives can I come up with that will help our students? So, for a couple examples, I mean, a big splashy one that we talked about a little bit is guaranteeing an internship in a foreign country. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a big deal. Um, the year before I came into this role, or you know, we had 5 students who interned abroad. The year before COVID hit, so 2018, 2019, well, really 2019, 2020, it was over 40 each time. We were over 40% of our students in the last year, which, so I think it was 56 in
Hmm.
2019, 2020 before the world kind of shut down. Um, in having a job in a foreign country it's literally a life-changing
It is.
experience.
Yeah.
So that doing that stuff, that's what energized me, that part of the job. Some of the stuff isn't as out there, but to me is just as crucial. We spent a lot of time working on retention rates,
Hmm.
and being able to better retain our students. And there's no silver bullet on this. At least
Hmm.
if there is, I don't know what it is. Maybe you know one, and if you do,
I
please let me know.
don't.
But we put in a number of initiatives. We within our economics coursework, we're actually working on. Speaking of another publication, we're trying to write up our experiences doing inclusive teaching methods within all of the principles of economics courses. We
Interesting.
also did some more intentional. Intentional registration for courses, right? We used to have the case where, okay, business students should get their stats, their econ right away when they come in. So it's this foundation for the later classes. And that thought has some appeal to it until you realize, well, we have students who come in though with all sorts of math backgrounds.
Yeah.
And for the students who are on the lower end of the math background scale, which of course you're always going to have a higher and a lower, and
Hmm.
maybe it's better to have those students get comfortable with college, then put them in the classes that are more challenging.
Yeah.
And if they have to wait until their second semester or even first semester sophomore year, there's still plenty of time to get through all the required classes. And they could take other classes. They could take their history, their science, the foreign language, whichever other classes maybe they're better suited at. Um, it's not something that's not really visible, but we thought it would be important. We've seen our retention rates in the business school the first year I was in on an interim basis, and I'll flip it to attrition rates. Our attrition was 18.7 for the first year. So like
Hmm.
81% of the students came back for their sophomore year, which
That's pretty
I thought
high.
was it's higher than average, but I
Yeah.
will tell you, I actually felt sick to my stomach when I got that
Okay.
data. Like that couple of years, that first time, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" We had
Yeah.
35 out of 150 or whatever the number was not come back. That I was sick. Now we had
Yeah.
started thinking about this. What are we going to change? 6 months before, I didn't realize, but then the numbers came in and they were bad. A lot of the new initiatives came in fall of 2018, and that year it improved to only 11% attrition,
Hmm.
89% first year retention. And last year it was 6.6% was the
Oh
attrition rate
wow.
for the first year, which meant 93 point something,
That's a big improvement.
93.4. It was enormous. And if you think about those as numbers, right? Like, okay, it's impressive, but those are students.
Yeah.
If a student comes here and they graduate, especially, if you have a student, let's say from a lower income quartile, boy, their life is going to be immeasurably better. I mean,
Yeah.
or maybe measurably better, but the incomes throughout their life will be incredible. I mean, they've done a degree from here, and the skills that have been learned really sets up our students for a lifetime of much higher earnings. But if somebody's
Hmm.
here for a year and a half and drops out and incurs student loan debt at the same time, they would
Yeah.
have been better never meeting us. And
Hmm.
that's like, this is important. This is a number of students. And then relatedly on that, for students of color, the improvement was actually a little bit more dramatic. The first
Hmm.
year, it was more atrocious. Our attrition rate was actually 33%. Uh,
Oh wow.
the next year, it was 14.6%. And then last year, we actually had 22 students of color start out in the fall of 2020, or I'm sorry, 2019. And none of them left before the start of
Okay.
their sophomore year. Zero. Now, these are small sample sizes. I don't really expect the long run to be zero, but
Yeah.
those are these are
But but
important
but you're
changes.
implementing changes, and what do you attribute the retention rate change to overall?
We've done, once again, I don't think there's a magic bullet. I think there's four big things we did in the business school. We did an inclusive teaching pilot with economics because there's research showing students with different backgrounds learn differently. And this was a number of initiatives within economics. It was mandatory tutoring for everybody because students from different backgrounds are more or less likely to ask for help. It was more low stakes homework assignments more often with feedback so that you could get feedback in a low stakes environment more often. It was implementing activities and games,
Yeah.
and like a lot of the activities and games that Abdullah, you would really know well. Kind of the idea of different professors might choose different ones, but try to mix it up, try to do
Yeah.
things to make class more lively so you reach students who learn in different ways.
Yeah.
So the inclusive teaching pilot in economics, the differential scheduling. So a
Hmm.
real focus on, okay, let's look at each student as they come in. What are their math SAT scores? What are their math grades? Should they go into all the math right away, or should we delay them? And if we delay them, how much? We want to make sure they graduate, right? But we could still delay a semester or even a year on stats and econ. We worked on our pitch for the business school.
Hmm.
In this one, in terms of a retention rate, I think like nobody basically leaves Harvard, right? If you
Nobody
start
leaves
with this
what? Sorry.
idea, like Harvard,
Oh yeah.
like
Okay.
if you get into Harvard, right? They have a 99% graduation rate or something like that. Uh,
Hmm.
the first year students at Harvard split up with their significant others.
Yeah.
They get cut from sports teams. They have the same bad life event happen, but people don't leave Harvard. Why? Well,
Hmm.
it's Harvard, right?
Yeah.
We've spent some time working on the idea of how, if you're talking to an employer, how you pick this school. Like, why did you choose to go here? And be proud of it. And yeah, we're one of 10 universities in the world that's got a
Yeah.
private undergraduate only AACSB accredited business school. We guaranteed international internships. We literally know of no other business school in the world that does this.
That's pretty.
And then within the major, so you work on that pitch. And then there's a number of other things that we've tried, giving schedules out to students. We've done some readings to try to, with faculty, on how to be better advisors. I mean, there's no silver bullet, but it's trying to have a culture where, we view this as important, and what are we going to do to try to, every student that can succeed, we want to help them succeed.
So what I'm hearing is you made it a goal. You put a lot of effort behind it, and you tried
Yep.
new things, and you were willing to experiment. And
Absolutely.
sometimes just making it a goal is important enough. So great job with all you're accomplishing. I'm sure faculty, student, administrators are all enjoying the rewards of what you have accomplished. So we talked about the pros of being a dean. I'm not going to call it a con, but what are some of the issues that you have come across that you're comfortable sharing?
Sure. I mean, the biggest con, and I mean, I'll speak in general, but sometimes you're going to have personnel issues,
Hmm.
and they just won't be fun. And if you find them fun, you're probably a bit sadistic.
Gotcha.
It's not fun to have to deal with personnel issues.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it can be really mentally draining.
Hmm.
So that part's not fun. Your schedule might not be your own anymore
Yeah.
as much. You won't quite have the freedom. I wake up every day and I open up my calendar now and figure out,
Yeah.
okay, what is my day today? And I don't even necessarily fully control my calendar. I have a wonderful assistant who will add things on as needed. And so I think those are kind of two of the biggest things. I mean, if you love teaching, if you love research, you're going to have less time for that. I've taught twice, and I love teaching. So that's that it's something you do have to give up.
Yeah.
But those, I think, those to me are the biggest cons that you would say. But far and away, personnel issues. And if you're doing a good job, I mean, you've got to be direct, right? Nobody's going to step into a dean position and have 100% of the people doing everything right. Really, almost nobody does everything right. So it's having conversations. Where can we be better? And so that's that to me is the big con.
So management and personnel management is an important, I guess, skill or trait of the job. What are your tips for somebody that's looking to move into administration? What are the things that you would encourage them to invest in learning?
It's a really good question. I think there could be a number of ways depending on the exact path or the exact type of school you might wish to go to. Certainly anything related to understanding the curriculum, understanding the handbook, understanding personnel issues, all of those things could be helpful. If one of the top things, and I don't know that it's necessarily fair, if you would like to be a dean someday, you really probably need to get to full professor first. I mean, it's not going to be a deal breaker, but getting to full professor somewhere means you are a full professor. And there are ads. If you would look through the ads for dean position, many of them will expect that they might even say things. We would expect somebody who has had scholarship at the rate to be a full professor in there. So that's actually a big tip that I've had to those who have mentioned they might want to get into administrative works or maybe someday be a dean, is one of the single most important things you can do is keep working with your scholarship to keep improving on that. But I feel there are some dean positions that are very much, you have so many faculty, you're kind of keeping the train tracks moving. There are some dean positions at bigger places where you might be an external only or an internal only. And those could all have very different paths on what might make for what might be the best route for those particular positions.
Gotcha. So people management, and then also still work on your scholarship. So let's go back to that question of balancing time. You said you love your research, you love teaching. How do you make sure that you have the time to still do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's kind of the classic economics question, right? We have a limited resource, which is our time, and how do I get the most impact? There are times I'll literally block out times in my calendar to do things. And then it's a question of what's the priority. I try to do things so my research may also have outside other value. So working on this economics of Star Wars, which was a lot of fun, and it's not traditional research. It's very much pedagogical research, putting the site together, we're writing articles. But then the university can use that, and I was on a podcast called Beltway Banthas, which actually gives good exposure to the university. So it kind of doubles up a little bit of the value. It's not just value for scholarship, but it's value to the university because the name gets out there. Teaching, I teach now. Basically, I'm going to try to teach once every other year class. I do. So I've done it twice in this role. I do not have the time to do it, but it's just too much fun. And I think there's a lot of value. We have 25 faculty, full-time faculty here who all teach. The average load is 3 a semester, so 6 courses per year. I've got to teach some just to keep staying in touch with students and to know what they're doing. The people who are here, Abdullah, if you were to step into this role, people know you're a great teacher. If you were to go, if NKU would say, hey, we want you to fill in and be interim or even permanent, right? They're going to know you right now are a great teacher, and you're going to have a ton of credibility. But then you're going to hire new people. Yeah. And they're like, hey, how do you know what I'm doing? Well, I did do this before, but students change. So I wish I had a great answer for it, but it's trying to carve out a little bit of time
Yeah.
and making it a priority to engage in those activities.
Calendar blocking is important.
Yep,
Matt, I wanted
yep.
to ask you about your classes. So when you get to teach, what's your favorite class to teach?
Game theory. Game
Okay.
theory is probably my favorite. I love Principles of Micro though as well. I think
Yeah.
Principles of Micro has just a lot of fun topics. Um, for both of those classes, I students throw in addition to the book and the game theory, I can get a used one really cheap. The students
Hmm.
put in $25 in the beginning of the semester.
Okay.
I just put it into an escrow account. This wasn't my idea. This was found from, I remember hearing it elsewhere, but kind of sharing some of the details on how I made a class out of this. So
Yeah.
students all throw in $25 at the beginning of the term, and then they play games before they learn the games,
Yeah.
stylized versions of the game. So they do that in game theory. It's much easier the whole time, but even in Principles of Micro, there's a number of opportunities to do, a perfect competition game, which is really simple and cheap, or a Cornell equilibrium, which is essentially a Monopoly game.
Hmm.
You know, or a prisoner's dilemma, or you could do a market pit game, of course. And so
Gotcha.
those are fun. I've taught political economic thought, which is just reading authors. We For this one, we read authors from left to right, and
Hmm.
it's very much a seminar discussion format, and that's a lot of fun. It's fun to kind of go from Karl Marx to Milton Friedman to Paul Krugman to Thomas Sowell, and so
Yeah.
students will see brilliant people, no matter what their views are. You're reading somebody who's very, very bright, who's
Hmm.
going to be writing something you wildly disagree with.
Yeah.
And that's a fun class to teach as well. So,
Well, that's I mean that's a testament to the liberal arts education, getting them exposed to different ideas and having them sharpen their viewpoints, but also being understanding other viewpoints as well. So I am glad to hear because we always talk about how academia or professors always have one lens and they're trying to brainwash their students, whichever you hear it from the left and you hear it from the right.
yep,
Um,
yep.
so it's good to hear of your experience and how you like to be diverse with the viewpoints. So this has been a great conversation. I've learned a lot about your experience. One thing that I realized that I forgot to ask you is where are you originally from, Matt? Is it
Oh,
Minnesota?
I grew up. Yep. I grew up in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So was born in Connecticut, but I moved out of there before I remember, basically.
Okay.
So the Twin Cities, Minneapolis-St. Paul was home. I'm a long-suffering Vikings fan in
Yeah.
terms of, which is a good area. And then South Dakota for undergraduate, Iowa State University for grad school. After 2 years in North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been in Stevens Grove since.
Nice, nice. And your free time. So let's talk about your hobbies on the free time. We've talked about
Sure.
Broadway economics. So you're a Broadway musical fan. Is that how you would
Yep.
describe yourself?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. So I'm trying to think, before COVID shut down, I probably averaged 6 to 8 Broadway shows, like shows literally on Broadway per year. And then I go to London a fair amount, and I probably see another, on average, 2 to 4 a year in London, and then
Okay.
throw an extra tour. We see a lot of shows. The Love Broadway. I've golfed for a long time, but not very well or very seriously. When the pandemic hit, okay, this is outside, it's reasonably safe. I invested a fair amount of time over this last summer trying
Mhm.
to get from truly bad to mediocre. Uh, and depending who you ask, it's either still truly bad or
Yeah.
but it's been it's fun to see improvement. It's a good activity, good exercise. So golf, our family, I often say our family likes 3 things together, and I love spending time with our family. One is Broadway.
Hmm.
Everybody in the family, I have 3 kids. They're now 19, 17, 14. They love to just go to restaurants. Doesn't
Hmm.
matter which restaurant. It could be from
Just out, huh?
fancy to wherever, but going out and eating. The third thing that everybody in our family actually really likes is escape rooms. And I don't know if
Really?
have you done an escape room?
I don't think I'll ever do an escape room. It's totally against everything that
Okay.
being locked in, I can't imagine being in a place where I'm volunteering to be locked in. But tell me what the excitement is. Sell me on this idea.
So first of all, you're never really truly trapped, right? Like that's
Okay.
number one, right? I mean, there's a door there. You could open it at any time, so you're not
Okay.
truly trapped. Um, it's an hour. It's a giant puzzle. You
Hmm.
go into a room and you have an hour to get out, and you have to solve. You have to use the clues often, and usually in a very systematic way to try
Hmm.
to get your way out. I mean, I love games. I love puzzles. And the first time I discovered it, it was probably 8 months into being a dean, I think,
Okay.
maybe even a little bit more. And I went into that room, and for 1 hour, I thought of nothing
Nothing.
else.
Gotcha.
Just, I walked out of that like refreshed because it was
Hmm.
just so much. My focus was all on this, what is the next thing to do? So if you like
That is,
puzzles and games, it's to me, it's fascinating, and it's a group activity. So it's something fun our family does together.
yeah. No, that's, in this whole switch to working from home, one thing that I've been struggling with is the balance of work-life balance. And, something that you just said that resonated with me is that 1 hour of not thinking about anything. That's what I
Yeah.
need. So I work out religiously. I have to work out for at least 45 minutes to an hour a day. But
Okay.
I still don't turn off because my email is on when I'm working out, and in between sets,
Sure.
I'm answering emails or being distracted. So I have to do a better job with that. Well,
Yeah.
I'll. You haven't sold me on escape rooms, but I'm thinking
Okay.
about it.
Okay. It's fair enough. It's fair enough. You're right, though. It's tough to turn the mind off,
Yeah,
and it is incredibly valuable. I don't do a good enough job of that either. You know, and then there are some horrendous mistakes I've made, like checking email 10 minutes before I plan on going to bed is just
yep.
the dumbest thing ever.
That is,
What good is really going to come from that? And sometimes it's horrendously bad. If
yeah,
an email comes up and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I just read?
yeah.
Like could literally keep me up. But yeah, if you can figure out how to disconnect, if you figure the trick out, please let me know.
I don't think I figured it out. I'm doing a lot of experiments. I've moved to calendar blocking because, similar to you, I don't have full control of my schedule because of my role with the
Sure.
Center for Economic Education.
Yep.
So, 90% of my time is outward facing with meetings, and you fit those wherever there's an opening on the schedule. So I've learned to block those times. Otherwise, somebody will find a time. And email, I have a 5:30 p.m. now cutoff, and it's there. I'm not good about setting the or following the expectation, but I try to remind
Sure.
myself after 5:30 I'm really not going to be able to accomplish much. So let me just worry about it tomorrow.
No, that's smart. That's smart.
Yeah. Well, Matt, this was a great conversation. I've learned a lot about being a dean and the transition from faculty to dean. As you and I had this discussion before. It's something that I've thought about maybe as a possibility to go into administration. So
Sure.
I appreciate you letting me get some thoughts and understanding of the role. And I love everything that you're doing, and I believe in the efforts that you have at Susquehanna University. And I really appreciate your time today.
No, thanks. This was a blast, and yeah, you'd be curious. It'd be fun to watch your next move, where into whatever position, because I think you'd kill it in these types of roles.
Well, thank you
The
for that. And as
it's
part of my inner circle, I'll make sure to reach out to you for advice as well. I appreciate it.
no, no, yep, no. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It was this was a lot of fun.
Perfect.